A warm cup of tea or water might be just what you need this morning. Go ahead, take a sip. Now imagine this. You're a mother of two, expecting your third, when your toxic mother-in-law demands control over your body. How far would you let family betrayal go? A warm cup of tea or water might be just what you need this morning. Go ahead, take a sip. Now imagine this. You're a mother of two, expecting your third, when your toxic mother-in-law demands control over your body. How far would you let family betrayal go? She called out of the blue. No, how are you? No excitement for the baby that's on the way. Just straight to the point, like a boss issuing orders. You should not get your tubes tied. Let that sink in. I'm the one giving birth, the one raising these children, and yet somehow she believes this decision belongs to her. Here's where things start getting messy. And honestly, this is why crazy Mile L stories aren't just gossip. They're real emotional battles behind closed doors. She accused my own parents, especially my mom, who happens to be an OBGYN, of convincing me to get sterilized. They hadn't even brought it up, not once, but in her mind, my mother was plotting. Why? Because she wanted to be the one influencing me. And so came the ultimatum. Go to your doctor with your husband and tell them you're not doing it before your mom arrives to help you with the baby. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a demand. That's when I realized this wasn't just about one decision, it was about power, about being the one in control of her daughter-in-law's life. The narcissistic mother-in-law behavior was on full display. She went on to remind me that I'm their daughter-in-law and I should do as they say. That phrase stung. I married her son, not enlisted into her army. And honestly, this is the kind of mindset that leads so many women into long, draining battles between being a wife and being someone's property. Then came the gender manipulation. You're having boys, she said, and boys forget their parents after they marry. Oh, but wait, she wasn't done. She wanted me to have a third child, specifically a girl to balance the family, to keep the son close. And if it's another boy, she actually suggested determining the gender early and terminating if it's not a girl. Let me pause here. This isn't just a toxic family dynamic. This is an ethical nightmare. This is the kind of relationship drama that leaves lasting scars, not just on the couple, but on the children born into it. And here's the kicker. This same mother-in-law, who's pressuring us to have more children, was no help at all when our first baby arrived. We had to cut her stay short because she caused more harm than good. Yet now, she's back with the same empty promise. Just have the baby. I'll take care of everything. Have you ever had someone in your life who expected you to carry all? Let me know in the comments. How would you handle a mother-in-law like this? Stay tuned, because in the next part, we'll talk about how her husband responded to all of this, and why that response might be the real betrayal. So, here's the million-dollar question. When your spouse knows his mom is out of line, but chooses to stay silent, is that love, or is it betrayal in slow motion? In the middle of all this mother-in-law drama, I looked to my husband, the one person I thought would have my back. I expected support. I expected him to draw the line. Instead, he went quiet. Let's be real. This wasn't the first time she crossed a line, but it felt like the last straw. When she told me not to get my tubes tied, and even went so far as to accuse my own mom of manipulating me, I wanted to respond right then and there. I was ready to speak my truth, to shut it down, firmly and clearly. But my husband stopped me. Just hear her out, he said. Hear her out? She's trying to override my bodily autonomy. She's pushing for a third child that neither of us wants, promising she'll raise it, even though she completely failed to show up the first time. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was manipulation wrapped in a maternal smile. But he didn't want to rock the boat, and that's where the deeper hurt began, not from what she said, but from what he didn't do. This is where husband-mom drama gets complicated, because it's not always about yelling or obvious conflict. Sometimes it's the quiet enabling, the passive acceptance, the refusal to confront toxic behavior because That's just how she is. And that's exactly the kind of environment where toxic families thrive, where silence becomes permission. I wasn't just dealing with a narcissistic mother-in-law. I was married to a man who had been trained his whole life to keep her happy at all costs, even if it meant throwing his own wife under the bus. And yet, this is so common. So many women write in with their own Just No Mill podcast experiences, where the mother-in-law controls everything and the husband watches from the sidelines like a spectator. Where's the line between keeping the peace and betraying your partner? I told him, if you won't say anything, I will. But he begged me not to, said we should just wait until the baby comes before making any decisions. But waiting is a decision too. And silence? It's loud enough to break trust. Here's the thing, I don't believe in revenge, but I do believe in reclaiming your voice. And in this case, my decision to move forward with the procedure was just that, a quiet but firm reclaiming of control. My body, my choice, no permission needed. And as for him, let's just say, sometimes the real betrayal doesn't come from the enemy, but from the person sleeping beside you. So let me ask you, if your spouse refused to defend you against a toxic parent, would that be a deal breaker? Coming up next, we're going to talk about the empty promises this mother-in-law made, and why they were never really about love, but about legacy and control. Ever had someone make a promise so big, so bold, staff, only to break it the moment things got inconvenient? Let's talk about how this toxic mother-in-law used empty promises to stay in control and how it backfired. So, after all the emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, and the backhanded comments about my own parents, she ended her rant with one last offer. A promise, really. If you have a third child, she said, I'll take care of everything. You won't have to lift a finger. At first glance, that sounds generous, noble even. But here's the truth. It wasn't about helping. It was about control. Control over my body, my home, and my family decisions. Because here's what really happened the first time she made that same promise. When our first baby was born, she swore she'd be our savior. You just have the baby, she said. I'll handle the rest. We believed her. We actually planned a 6-week stay for her after the birth, thinking we'd have some real support. But what followed was pure justnomil podcast material, constant criticism, emotional outbursts, and zero practical help. Not only did she not help, she actively made things harder. We had to cut her visit short after just a couple of weeks. Why? Because the drama she brought into our home was more exhausting than the newborn. She didn't cook, she didn't clean. She held the baby for selfies, then handed him back the moment he cried. And yet, here she was again, promising she'd take full responsibility for a third child. Sound familiar? It's the classic, crazy MIL story playbook. Manipulate through guilt, then pretend to be the hero. And let's not forget, this is the same woman who showed zero appreciation for my mother. My mom, who actually did show up, who juggled a full-time job and still helped with late-night feedings and laundry. But instead of gratitude, she got judgment. Because in this narcissistic mother-in-law's eyes, no one else should play the maternal role except her. It wasn't about the baby. It was about preserving her status. The family matriarch, the one everyone depends on, even if she's clearly not dependable. And that brings me to a hard truth. Sometimes, the people who insist they want to help are really just looking for leverage. These toxic family Reddit moments might sound extreme, but they're more common than we think. Behind every offer to help can be a silent contract, one that says, now you owe me. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been promised support that turned out to be emotional debt? Someone who offered to help only to use it later as leverage or guilt? Let's talk about it in the comments. Because for every fake... In the next part, I'll walk you through the moment I finally said no. Not just to her, but to the entire dynamic. Because sometimes choosing peace means choosing distance. What happens when saying no feels like setting off a bomb in your own family? Because that's exactly what I did. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fallout. After all the manipulation, the guilt, the broken promises, I reached my limit. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done explaining, done justifying, done hoping things would magically get better if I just kept the peace. This wasn't just another chapter in a wife versus mother-in-law story. This was the ending of a cycle I had been stuck in for too long. The moment I signed the paperwork for the procedure, yes, the one she tried so hard to stop, I felt an odd mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because I knew this choice would shake the already fragile ground beneath our family, but relief because I finally chose myself. And guess what? That decision, though deeply personal, turned out to be the loudest no I had ever spoken to her. When she found out, it wasn't pretty. There were phone calls. There were accusations. You betrayed the family. You let your mother win. You're destroying our future. But here's the truth. I didn't betray anyone. I simply stopped betraying myself. This wasn't about revenge, not in the dramatic sense. But if you ask me, there's a kind of true revenge story in reclaiming your autonomy. There's a quiet power in no longer asking for approval from someone who never intended to give it. What surprised me more than her reaction, though, was my husband's. He didn't fight me on it, but he also didn't support me. He became distant, like my choice made him uncomfortable, maybe even resentful. That silence, it spoke louder than any argument we ever had. In many family betrayal podcast stories, we expect a dramatic climax, yelling, confrontation, ultimatums. But sometimes betrayal looks like apathy, like letting your partner carry the emotional weight alone, like watching them sink and staying on shore. So there I was, with one kid in my arms, another on the way, and a husband who had already emotionally checked out. I realized that the real battle wasn't just with my toxic mother-in-law. It was with a marriage that had quietly stopped being a partnership. And as painful as that truth was, it also brought clarity. Sometimes we hold on to relationships because of what they should be, because of the vows we made, or the family we imagined. But at some point, you have to ask, is the cost of staying you? So I'll ask you this. Have you ever stayed quiet to protect someone else's comfort while sacrificing your own peace? Let me know in the comments. I'm here to read, not to judge. In the final part of this story, we'll talk about what it means to rebuild on your terms and why walking away can... What if walking away from someone is the first step toward walking back to yourself? After everything, after the guilt trips, the silence from my husband, and the chaos that came with every conversation involving my toxic mother-in-law, I made a decision that many wouldn't expect. I chose peace. But more importantly, I chose distance. Letting go of the idea of the perfect family was painful. I mean, we all grow up imagining that family means support, unity, unconditional love. But what happens when that's not what you get? What happens when the people who are supposed to lift you up are the ones weighing you down? In my case, it meant letting go of expectations and starting over. It meant no longer putting myself last in the name of being a good wife or a respectful daughter-in-law. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is enough. I turned in the paperwork, I followed through on the procedure, and shortly after that, I started preparing for divorce. This wasn't revenge, this was clarity. And if you followed me through this whole relationship drama podcast, you know, this wasn't just about one decision. It was about years of manipulation, silence, and gaslighting. And as painful as it was, I realized something that I want you to remember too. Peace isn't found in the absence of conflict. Peace is found in the presence of truth. Yes, it hurt to let go of a marriage I once believed in. Yes, it was terrifying to imagine raising 2 children on my own. But it was even scarier to imagine raising them in a home where resentment was louder than love, where their mother was silenced, where their grandmother's control disguised itself as help. This isn't just another crazy mill story. This is about reclaiming a life that belongs to you. And if you're listening to this and thinking, this sounds a little too familiar, I want you to know you're not alone. There's a reason so many people share their own toxic family Reddit stories or seek out true revenge stories just to feel seen. Sometimes, hearing someone else say, "Me too," can be the thing that gives us courage to take the next step. Whether that's drawing boundaries, having the hard conversation, or even just acknowledging that you deserve better. So if this story resonated with you, even just a little, here's what I'd love you to do. Drop a simple, "I hear you," in the comments. If you've ever had to choose peace over people-pleasing, or type, "That's me," if you've ever been in a situation where walking away was your way of surviving. You never know who needs to see your comment to feel a little less alone, and if you made it this far, thank you for holding space for this story. Follow for more story time with twist, narcissistic mother-in-law drama, and real talk from people reclaiming their voice. Until next time, choose truth, choose peace, choose you.